There is a unique, suffocating kind of tragedy in realizing that the life you are living is nothing more than a carefully curated movie set, and you are just a background extra in your own marriage. For 7 years, I poured my heart, my soul, and my career into supporting my wife, Chloe, believing that the vows we took meant we were building a future together. But while I was raising our son and managing our actual home, she was busy fabricating a digital empire built entirely on lies, exploiting our family to amass millions of followers and a fortune to match. She thought her wealth, her blue checkmark, and her army of adoring fans made her a god. She assumed that because I was the quiet, supportive stay-at-home dad, I would simply roll over and accept her ruthless betrayal to protect the brand. But she made one catastrophic miscalculation. She forgot that the man who built her digital stage was also the only one who held the power to cut the lights, broadcasting her true, ugly nature to the very world she so desperately manipulated. My name is Daniel. To the outside world, or at least to the 3 million subscribers who religiously tuned into my wife's channel, I was the ultimate Instagram husband. I was the smiling, handsome guy in the background, flipping pancakes on Sunday mornings, playfully chasing our 5-year-old son, Leo, around the yard, and looking at Chloe with absolute, unfiltered adoration. Truth was, my adoration used to be real. Before the brand deals, before the ring lights and the sponsored luxury vacations, Chloe and I were just 2 kids trying to make it work. When Leo was born, we made a joint decision. Her blog was starting to gain serious traction, and my freelance graphic design business allowed me to work flexible hours. It made sense for me to step back, work from my home office, and become Leo's primary caregiver so she could ride the wave of her rising success. And ride that wave she did. Chloe's channel, simply titled Chloe's Nest, exploded into a massive lifestyle juggernaut. Her entire brand was meticulously built on the image of the perfect, modern American family. She sold the illusion of effortless domestic bliss, organic baby food recipes, flawlessly decorated nurseries, marriage advice, and heartwarming family vlogs that garnered millions of views. To her followers, she was a supermom, effortlessly balancing a lucrative career, a passionate marriage, and a deeply hands-on approach to motherhood. Women everywhere looked at her comments section and typed, "Goals," wishing they could have a fraction of the perfect life she projected through the lens of her expensive DSLR camera. But the reality behind the camera was a freezing, sterile wasteland. The absolute second the recording light blinked off, the warm, vibrant mother completely vanished. Chloe was entirely disconnected from the very life she was monetizing. She didn't cook those pancake breakfasts. She ordered them from a high-end bakery, plated them, filmed a 10-second clip of us eating, and then retreated to her office to check her engagement metrics. She barely knew the name of Leo's kindergarten teacher, and she treated me less like a husband and more like an unpaid, live-in production assistant. I tolerated the coldness because I loved her, and because I fiercely loved our son. I desperately convinced myself that this icy, transactional version of Chloe was temporary. I told myself that the immense pressure of managing a multi-million-dollar brand, negotiating with sponsors, and constantly feeding the relentless algorithm was just overwhelming her. I made excuses for her constant absences and her snapping temper. "She's just stressed," I would whisper to myself as I tucked Leo into bed alone for the 4th night in a row while she scrolled endlessly through her feed in the other room. "When things slow down, we'll get our marriage back." But things were never going to slow down. The gaping chasm between her public persona and her private reality was only growing wider, and the suffocating isolation I felt was about to turn into a nightmare. Because as Chloe's empire expanded, she decided she needed to elevate her production value. She needed to take Chloe's Nest to the next level. So she hired a slick, arrogant new videographer and brand manager named Chase to help her expand her reach. And with Chase's arrival, the fragile, fractured illusion of our marriage wasn't just pushed to the breaking point. It was completely, brutally shattered. Chase walked into our lives like a perfectly tailored storm, smelling of expensive cologne and carrying an oversized iced Americano. Until that point, I had been the one behind the camera. I shot her videos on our modest DSLR, edited them late at night after Leo went to sleep, and helped her brainstorm content. It was a partnership. But as Chloe's Nest surged past the 2 million subscriber mark, the sponsors began demanding a level of production that I simply didn't have the time to execute while also being a full-time father. Chloe told me she needed a professional. She needed a creative director. Enter Chase. He was 28, wore perfectly distressed designer jeans, and spoke almost exclusively in marketing buzzwords. Synergy, brand elevation, aesthetic pivoting. From the moment he stepped into our living room, he looked at me not as the co-architect of his new client's success, but as a quaint, slightly pathetic relic of her amateur past. "It's cute that you've been doing her edits, man," Chase told me on his first day, clapping me on the shoulder with a patronizing smirk. "But we're playing in the big leagues now. I'm going to take Chloe's brand from relatable mom to aspirational luxury. We need to elevate." I should have told him to get out of my house right then. I should have recognized the subtle, arrogant disrespect. But Chloe was practically glowing with excitement, absolutely captivated by his vision. I swallowed my pride, smiled, and handed over the hard drives. I told myself it was for the best. It would free up my time. I could focus on my own freelance graphic design work and, more importantly, spend more quality time with Leo. But Chase didn't just take over the editing. He took over my wife. Almost overnight, the entire fabric of our daily lives was completely rewritten. Chloe's nest stopped featuring our actual home. The content shifted. Suddenly, she and Chase were constantly going on location scouts and brand retreats. A weekend in Aspen to shoot a sponsored winter wear campaign. A 4-day trip to Chalum to collaborate with a luxury resort. Whenever I asked why I couldn't bring Leo and tag along, making it a real family trip, Chloe would look at me with a mixture of pity and profound annoyance. "Daniel, please," she would sigh, tossing designer clothes into her suitcase. "It's not a vacation, it's a high-pressure production environment. I can't be worrying about Leo's nap schedule or what you're doing while Chase and I are trying to capture golden hour footage. Just hold down the fort here. I'm doing this for us." For us, that phrase became her ultimate shield, the universal justification for every single one of her prolonged absences. But the woman returning from those trips wasn't doing anything for us. She was slipping further and further away, replaced by a cold, irritable stranger who treated her own home like a wildly inconvenient layover between flights. The red flags began to multiply, waving frantically in my face, but I was so terrified of the truth that I actively blindfolded myself. The first undeniable crack in the filter happened on a quiet Tuesday evening. Chloe was in the shower, and we had ordered takeout. The delivery driver texted that he was lost in our subdivision. My phone was charging upstairs, so I reached across the kitchen island and tapped the screen of Chloe's phone to message him back. We had known each other's passcodes since college. It was the year we met, 2014. I typed it in. Incorrect passcode. I frowned and tried again. Incorrect passcode. Just as the screen locked me out, Chloe walked into the kitchen, a towel wrapped around her hair. When she saw her phone in my hand, her eyes widened, and a flash of genuine, unadulterated panic crossed her face. She practically lunged across the island, snatching the device from my fingers. "What are you doing?" She snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. "I was just trying to text the delivery guy," I said, holding my hands up in surrender, completely taken aback by her hostility. "You changed your passcode." She clutched the phone to her chest, her breathing slightly elevated. She quickly smoothed her features, forcing a tight, unnatural laugh. "Oh, yeah, Chase told me I needed to tighten up my digital security. You know, with the brand growing so fast, we have a lot of sensitive sponsor contracts in my email. It's just a liability thing, Daniel. Don't be weird about it." I didn't push it. I wanted to believe her. But the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened. Following the password change, a new, agonizing pattern emerged: the manufactured fights. Chloe needed space. She needed excuses to be on her phone, to leave the house, to escape the crushing reality of the family she was monetizing. So she began starting vicious, irrational arguments over absolutely nothing. If I folded her laundry incorrectly, it wasn't a simple mistake. It was an indictment of my incompetence and a sign that I didn't respect her time. If Leo left a toy truck in the hallway, she would explode, screaming that she couldn't ideate or create in a pigsty and that I was failing as a father. She would use these completely fabricated crises as the perfect excuse to slam the front door, get into her Range Rover, and peel out of the driveway. "I can't be in this house right now," she would yell. "I'm going to Chase's studio to work. Don't wait up." She would stay gone until 2 or 3 in the morning. I would sit on the edge of our bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was losing my mind. I was gaslighting myself, internalizing her anger, convincing myself that I really was unsupportive, that I really was failing to manage the house properly while she carried the financial burden. But the absolute hardest part, the part that broke my heart into a million jagged pieces, was watching what this was doing to Leo. Leo was a smart, sensitive little boy who idolized his mother. But off camera, Chloe had essentially ceased to exist as a parent. When she was home, she was sequestered in her office or glued to her phone's screen. When Leo would run up to her, holding a drawing he had made or asking her to play blocks, she wouldn't even look up. "Not right now, Leo," she would snap coldly, pushing him away. "Mommy is working, go find your dad." Leo would walk back into the living room, his little shoulders slumped, his eyes brimming with confused tears. I would scoop him up, holding him tight, whispering that Mommy was just very busy, but she loved him so much. But the absolute sickening hypocrisy of it all was the camera. If a sponsor required a family-centric post, Chloe would burst out of her office with a blinding, 1,000-watt smile. She would turn on her bright LED ring light, set up the tripod in the living room, and call Leo over in a sickeningly sweet, melodic voice. "Come here, my little angel. Let's show everyone the new organic snacks we're trying today." She would pull him onto her lap, kissing his cheeks, laughing and playing the role of the devoted, obsessed supermom to absolute perfection. She would look into the lens with a look of pure maternal bliss. And the absolute second she got the B-roll she needed, the moment her finger pressed the stop button on the recording, the smile would instantly vanish. She would drop Leo back onto the floor like a heavy sack of flour, her face reverting to a cold, exhausted scowl. "Daniel, take him, he got jelly on my blouse," she would mutter, already walking back toward her office and shutting the heavy oak door behind her. My gut screamed at me. Every instinct, every primal alarm bell in my body was ringing, telling me that my marriage wasn't just struggling, it was dying a violent, deceitful death. I knew something was fundamentally, deeply wrong. I knew Chase was more than just a videographer. I knew the changed passwords and the late-night editing sessions were lies. But I was terrified. I was completely financially dependent on her empire, and the thought of destroying my son's family paralyzed me. So I buried my intuition. I called myself paranoid. I forced myself to smile, to make the coffee, and to play the supportive background character. I thought I could survive the coldness if I just kept my head down. But I had no idea that a simple technical glitch, a mundane error regarding cloud storage space, was about to force me to watch the agonizing, unfiltered truth of my wife's betrayal in high-definition video. The weekend that officially ended my marriage began on a Friday morning, shrouded in the familiar, frantic energy of Chloe's relentless ambition. She was packing her oversized, monogrammed Louis Vuitton luggage with an array of designer outfits, her movements sharp and hurried. According to the itinerary she had hastily texted me the night before, she and Chase were heading to a luxury boutique hotel in the downtown arts district for a 3-day immersive brand alignment retreat. "We need to completely overhaul the visual language of the channel," Chloe had explained, not making eye contact as she forcefully zipped her makeup bag. "The current aesthetic is too domestic. The sponsors want high-end luxury. Chase managed to secure a complimentary suite for us to use as a shooting location in exchange for a few dedicated grid posts. I'll be working around the clock, Daniel. Do not call me unless Leo is literally in the emergency room." "I won't," I had replied, standing in the doorway of our bedroom holding a basket of folded laundry. "Have a good trip. Try to get some actual sleep, okay?" She had paused, offering me a tight, fleeting smile that didn't reach her eyes. The exact same smile she gave the barista when her oat milk latte was taking too long. "Thanks. Love you. Bye, Leo." She had yelled down the stairs before grabbing her bags and sweeping out the front door. I spent that Friday and Saturday fully embracing my role as the dedicated stay-at-home dad. Leo and I built a massive fort out of sofa cushions, ordered a ridiculous amount of pizza, and watched animated movies until he fell asleep on my chest, his sticky little fingers clutching my shirt. I carried him upstairs, tucked him into his superhero bed, and stood in the doorway for a long time just watching the slow, peaceful rise and fall of his breathing. He was the single best thing in my life. He was the reason I put up with the coldness, the dismissiveness, and the ever-growing ghost that was my wife. By 9 o'clock on Saturday night, the house was profoundly, overwhelmingly quiet. I decided to use the rare downtime to catch up on some of my freelance graphic design work. I went into Chloe's office, a room that looked more like a high-end furniture showroom than a workspace, complete with a neon sign bearing her channel's logo and perfectly arranged faux succulents. Her massive, top-of-the-line iMac sat glowing in the center of the pristine white desk. She usually took her sleek laptop on her trips, leaving the desktop running to process massive video exports. I sat down in her ergonomic chair and nudged the mouse to wake the screen. Instantly, a barrage of red error messages flooded the monitor. Startup disk full. Cloud sync failed, insufficient storage. Warning, system memory critically low. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Chloe was a brilliant marketer, but she was a digital hoarder. She would shoot 300 takes of a simple 5-second product plug and refuse to delete any of the raw files, completely bogging down our shared home network. Because I had always acted as her unofficial IT support, I knew exactly how to clear the cache. I opened the Finder window and began navigating through the labyrinth of her external drives and local folders. The sheer volume of manufactured reality housed on that hard drive was staggering. Folder after folder of hyper-edited photos, color-graded family portraits where my smile was literally photoshopped to look brighter, and endless B-roll of luxury hand creams. I finally tracked down the culprit, causing the hard drive to stall. It was an unsynced folder buried deep in a subdirectory, simply titled Downtown B-roll Dump. It was a massive file, sitting at nearly 80 gigabytes. The cloud sync had attempted to upload it automatically when she connected her camera to her laptop at the hotel, pushing the raw files through our shared network, but it had crashed our local storage halfway through. Assuming it was just hours of heavy, uncompressed 4K footage of hotel lobby architecture and aesthetic coffee cups that Chase had haphazardly dumped onto the server, I clicked the folder. I intended to compress the files, or perhaps just delete the useless, blurry outtakes to free up the system memory. There was only one video file inside. The thumbnail was entirely black. I double-clicked it. The media player launched, the loading wheel spinning for a few seconds as the massive file struggled to render. When the video finally buffered and pressed play, the room was plunged into an eerie, muffled silence. It wasn't B-roll of a luxury hotel lobby. The camera had been set down on a flat surface, likely a nightstand or a dresser, pointing slightly upward. The lighting was incredibly dim, illuminated only by the warm, amber glow of a bedside lamp and the distant, flickering lights of the downtown skyline bleeding through a large hotel window. For the first 30 seconds, the frame was empty. I could just hear the faint, rustling sound of clothing being dropped onto a carpeted floor. I leaned closer to the monitor, my brow furrowing in confusion. "What is this?" I muttered to the empty room. Then 2 figures moved into the frame. The air in my lungs turned to solid ice. It was as if all the gravity in the world had suddenly vanished, leaving me floating in a terrifying, suffocating vacuum. It was Chase. He was shirtless, his hands tangled aggressively in the blonde hair of the woman pressed violently against his chest. And the woman was my wife. I didn't gasp. I didn't scream. My entire body went rigidly, agonizingly numb. I sat frozen in the ergonomic chair, bathed in the blue light of the monitor, watching the woman I had sworn to love and protect eagerly wrap her arms around another man's neck. The footage wasn't a brief, mistaken kiss. It was the frantic, deeply comfortable intimacy of 2 people who had clearly been doing this for a very long time. Chase had apparently set the camera down while transferring files, forgot it was recording, and let it run. I watched as they stumbled backward, falling onto the edge of the plush hotel bed that was just barely visible in the bottom corner of the frame. My hand trembled violently as it hovered over the mouse. Every primal instinct inside my brain was screaming at me to click the little red X in the corner of the window, to shut it off, to burn the computer to the ground, to run upstairs, grab my sleeping son, and drive until I ran out of gas. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the gruesome, magnetic horror of my own life falling apart, and then the audio broke me entirely. Chase pulled back slightly, breathing heavily, a smug, arrogant laugh rumbling in his chest. "You sure the husband isn't going to check your location on Find My Friends? He seemed pretty tense when we left." Chloe's voice echoed through the high-fidelity speakers on the desk. It wasn't the sweet, melodic voice she used for her millions of followers. It wasn't even the cold, irritated voice she used with me. It was a dark, venomous, cruel sound. She laughed, a genuine, breathless giggle that made my stomach violently heave. "Daniel, God, please," Chloe scoffed, the sound of skin slapping against skin echoing sickeningly in the quiet office. "He's completely clueless. He thinks I'm out here exhausting myself for the brand. As long as I let him play house and pat him on the head occasionally, he's totally fine. He's practically a glorified babysitter at this point." "A glorified babysitter who edits my sloppy seconds," Chase sneered, leaning in to kiss her neck. "Don't remind me," Chloe groaned playfully. "I can't wait until we hit the next subscriber milestone. Once the new brand deal's clear, I can finally afford to just buy him out of the house. Until then, I just have to keep up the perfect family routine. It sells too well to drop the dead weight just yet." Dead weight, glorified babysitter. The words hit me with the physical force of a sledgehammer. My vision blurred, the edges of the room spinning dizzily around me. I felt a hot, acidic surge of bile rise in the back of my throat. I pushed myself away from the desk, stumbling backward until my spine slammed hard against the wall of her office. I slid down the drywall, pulling my knees to my chest, burying my face in my hands. I couldn't breathe. The pain was so acute, so violently raw, that I thought my heart was literally rupturing in my chest. 7 years. 7 years of supporting her dreams, of managing the endless tantrums, of raising our son practically single-handedly while she built her empire. I had compromised my own career, my own sanity, and my own pride to ensure she could shine. And this was the reality. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't even a human being to her. I was just a convenient prop, a free nanny, a gullible idiot keeping the illusion afloat so she could sleep with her manager and rake in the sponsorship money. I sat on the floor of her pristine, fake office for nearly an hour, listening to the agonizing, intimate sounds of their betrayal looping from the computer speakers. I let the tears fall until my eyes were burning and dry. I let the heartbreak completely shatter me. But as the clock on the wall ticked past midnight, something inside me fundamentally shifted. The intense, suffocating wave of grief began to recede, leaving behind a vast, freezing ocean of absolute clarity. The man who had gently folded her laundry that morning, the man who had made excuses for her coldness, died on that office floor. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face, my expression hardening into a mask of pure, unadulterated steel. I walked back over to the desk. I didn't close the video. Instead, I plugged a highly encrypted 1 terabyte external hard drive into the back of the iMac. I dragged the downtown B-roll dump folder directly onto my drive. I watched the progress bar meticulously copy every single byte of her infidelity and her cruel, mocking confession. When the transfer was complete, I safely ejected my drive and slid it into my pocket. Then, I permanently deleted the folder from her cloud server and cleared the digital trash bin, erasing all evidence that the glitch had ever occurred. Chloe wanted to treat our marriage like a business transaction. She wanted to view me as an expendable employee keeping her precious brand afloat. She was about to find out what happens when the unpaid IT guy decides to stop fixing the glitches and let the entire server burn to the ground. The 48 hours between discovering the footage and my wife's return were an exercise in agonizing, suffocating psychological endurance. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the sickening, muffled audio of Chloe and Chase laughing at my expense echoed in the dark. Glorified babysitter. Dead weight. I walked around our perfectly decorated, impeccably clean house feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. I packed a suitcase in my mind 100 times. I imagined screaming, throwing her designer clothes onto the front lawn, and tearing the fake domestic illusion down to the studs. But every time the rage threatened to boil over, I would walk past Leo's bedroom. I would see his little superhero sneakers lined up neatly by the door, and the fiery, destructive anger would instantly turn to ice-cold terror. If I simply blew up and walked out, I would be leaving my son alone with a narcissist who viewed him as nothing more than a highly engaging Instagram prop. I had to be smart. Chloe's Range Rover pulled into the driveway at exactly 7:00 p.m. on Sunday. I was sitting at the massive marble kitchen island, the overhead pendant lights turned off, illuminated only by the under-cabinet LEDs. Sitting flat on the marble surface in front of me was my iPad. I heard the heavy thud of the front door, followed by the clatter of her Louis Vuitton luggage hitting the hardwood floor of the foyer. "Hey, babe, I'm completely dead," Chloe called out, her voice carrying that manufactured, breezy exhaustion she used whenever she wanted to avoid conversation. She walked into the kitchen, wearing an oversized cashmere sweater and oversized sunglasses pushed up into her messy blonde hair. She smelled like expensive hotel soap, airport coffee, and the faint, lingering spice of Chase's cologne. "Where's Leo?" she asked, opening the refrigerator to grab a bottle of sparkling water without looking at me. "He's asleep," I said. My voice was entirely flat, stripped of the warmth I had freely given her for 7 years. She popped the cap off the water and finally turned to look at me, leaning against the counter. Her brow furrowed slightly, sensing the heavy, toxic atmosphere in the room. "Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept all weekend. Did Leo give you trouble?" I didn't answer her. I reached forward, tapped the screen of the iPad to wake it up, and slid the device smoothly across the cool marble island until it stopped right in front of her hands. "You left a folder trying to sync to the home cloud server," I said quietly. "It crashed the desktop. I had to go in and clear the cache." Chloe looked down at the screen. I had cued the video to the exact moment she and Chase moved into the frame, their bodies tangled together in the dim amber light of the hotel room. I reached over and pressed play. The audio filled the quiet kitchen. He thinks I'm out here exhausting myself for the brand. He's practically a glorified babysitter at this point. I watched her face, waiting for the crumble. I braced myself for the tears, the frantic apologies, the desperate, panicked begging that universally follows the exposure of a devastating lie. I expected her knees to buckle under the sheer, undeniable weight of her guilt. She stared at the screen for 10 seconds, her expression completely unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she reached out and tapped the screen, pausing the video. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She picked up her bottle of sparkling water, took a slow sip, and looked me dead in the eye. "So," Chloe said, her voice chillingly calm, completely devoid of an ounce of remorse, "you snooped." I stared at her, the breath entirely knocked out of my lungs by the sheer audacity of her reaction. "I snooped." I repeated, my voice rising, the carefully maintained dam of my composure beginning to crack. "Chloe, you are on video sleeping with your manager. You are on tape calling me a babysitter and dead weight. I just watched my entire marriage disintegrate on a computer screen, and your response is that I snooped." "Keep your voice down," she hissed, her eyes narrowing into cold, reptilian slits. "Leo is sleeping. Don't you dare use him as a shield right now." I snapped, standing up from the bar stool. How long have you been sleeping with Chase while I'm here raising our son?" "Does it matter?" she asked casually, setting the water bottle down and crossing her arms. She looked at me not with the shame of a caught spouse, but with the profound irritation of a CEO dealing with a complaining subordinate. "You know, Daniel, I was hoping we could avoid this messy conversation until the fourth quarter sponsorships cleared, but since you decided to go digging through my private files, let's just lay it all out." She walked slowly around the kitchen island, closing the distance between us. The sociopathic lack of empathy in her posture made my skin crawl. "You're mad. You're hurt. I get it," she began, her tone deeply patronizing. "But let's look at the reality of our situation. Last year, Chloe's Nest brought in just over $4 million in gross revenue. Do you know how much your little freelance graphic design business brought in? $32,000. I pay for this house. I pay for the cars. I pay for Leo's elite private kindergarten. I fund your entire, comfortable existence." "It's not about the money," I yelled, stepping back from her. "It's about our vows. It's about our family." "Our family is a brand, Daniel." She fired back, her voice finally rising to meet mine, sharp and venomous. "It is a highly curated, wildly profitable product. And right now, you are a crucial part of that product. My audience loves the supportive dad angle, but don't ever, for one single second, confuse your role in the brand with actual leverage." "Leverage?" I breathed, utterly horrified. "Yes, leverage," she said, stepping into my personal space, looking up at me with absolute, ruthless certainty. "If you decide you want to be a martyr, if you pack a bag and walk into a divorce lawyer's office tomorrow, I promise you, I will completely destroy you." I shook my head, feeling a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. "You cheated. I have proof. A video you illegally obtained from a private folder on my personal computer." She laughed, a dark, breathless sound. "Good luck getting a judge to admit that, but let me tell you what my legal team will submit. My lawyers are sharks, Daniel. I will bury you in litigation until you are completely bankrupt. I will outspend you 50-1, and my PR team." She smiled, a wicked, terrifying grin. "They will absolutely crucify you." She reached out, tracing a manicured fingernail lightly over the collar of my shirt. I flinched, swatting her hand away, but she just smiled wider. "I control the narrative," she whispered. "I have 3 million women who hang on my every word. If you try to leave me, I will launch a media campaign claiming you were intensely jealous of my success. I will say you were controlling, emotionally abusive, and lazy. The internet will tear you to shreds before you can even issue a statement. And when it comes to custody..." She paused, letting the silence stretch, ensuring the next words hit me with maximum devastating impact. "I am the wealthy, successful supermom. You are an unemployed freelancer living in my house. I will take full physical custody of Leo. You will be lucky to see him every other weekend, supervised. I will erase you from his life, just as easily as I can erase you from my channel." The kitchen felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in on me. She wasn't just threatening my pride, she was holding a gun to my relationship with my son. And the most terrifying part was, looking at her vast resources and the absolute adoration of her fan base, I knew she could probably pull it off. I was a nobody. She was an untouchable titan. "So here is how this is going to work," Chloe dictated, stepping back and smoothing the front of her cashmere sweater. "We are going to have an open marriage. You will stay here. You will continue to take care of Leo. You will manage the house. And when I need you to smile for a sponsored grid post, you will put on a flannel shirt and look at me like I am the center of your universe." "And you?" I asked, my voice barely a cracked whisper. "I will continue to build our empire, and I will continue to see Chase," she stated matter-of-factly. "You get to live in a mansion, never worry about a bill, and spend every day with your son. You get everything you want, Daniel, as long as you play your part and keep your mouth shut. If you don't, you lose Leo." She looked at me, waiting for my rebellion. She was daring me to fight her, daring me to give her an excuse to unleash the war dogs she had just threatened me with. I looked at the woman standing in front of me. The mother of my child. She was completely hollow, a monster hiding behind a ring light and a pastel color palette. But I also looked at the ceiling, toward the room where my 5-year-old son was sleeping peacefully, entirely unaware that his family had just been taken hostage. I couldn't win a screaming match. I couldn't win a sudden, impulsive divorce filing. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to keep my son, I had to play the long game. I had to let her believe her threats had worked. I had to let her believe she had completely broken me. I dropped my gaze to the marble floor. I let my shoulders sag, adopting a posture of absolute crushing defeat. I forced a single tear to spill over my lash line, letting it track silently down my cheek. "Okay," I whispered, making my voice shake with surrender. "Okay, Chloe, whatever you want, just please don't take Leo away from me." A look of profound, arrogant satisfaction washed over her face. The tension left her shoulders. She had flexed her power and the peasant had bowed. "Good choice, Daniel," she said softly. She reached out and patted my cheek, a condescending, degrading gesture that made me want to vomit. "Now, put the iPad away. I have an early morning Zoom call with a skincare brand." She picked up her water bottle, grabbed her luggage, and walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking rhythmically up the hardwood stairs. I stood alone in the dark kitchen for a long time. The tears on my face dried. The posture of defeat vanished, replaced by an ironclad, lethal resolve. She thought she had trapped me in a cage of her own design. But as I slid my hand into my pocket, feeling the solid, metallic edge of the encrypted hard drive housing the evidence that could end her career, I realized something she had entirely overlooked. She had threatened to destroy my life using her brand. She had no idea that I was about to use that exact same brand to completely, publicly, and irreversibly annihilate hers. The morning after my wife handed me the terms of my own psychological imprisonment, I woke up before the sun. I went downstairs to our massive, state-of-the-art kitchen and engaged in a ritual that now felt like a grotesque pantomime. I made Chloe her morning artisanal matcha latte. I steamed the oat milk, whisked the vibrant green powder with a bamboo brush, and poured it into her favorite ceramic mug. When she finally descended the staircase an hour later, dressed in a matching set of designer athleisure wear, she looked refreshed, radiant, and utterly victorious. She took the mug from my hand without a word of thanks, giving me a patronizing pat on the shoulder. "Chase is picking me up in 20 minutes, she announced, checking her reflection in the dark screen of the microwave. "We have a full day of shooting B-roll at the new botanical gardens for the spring aesthetic refresh. I need you to handle Leo's drop-off and pickup, and make sure the house cleaner actually gets the baseboards in the guest room today. They were filthy last week." "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice soft, flat, and subservient. "Have a productive shoot." She offered a smug, glittering smile, entirely convinced that she had successfully broken my spirit. She believed that her threat had completely domesticated me. And why wouldn't she? I was playing the part of the defeated, cowardly husband flawlessly. I kissed Leo on the forehead, strapped him into his car seat, and waved as her manager, the man she was sleeping with, pulled into our driveway to whisk her away. But the absolute second Chase's matte black SUV disappeared around the corner of our gated subdivision, the subservient husband ceased to exist. I dropped Leo off at his private kindergarten, offering his teacher my usual warm, friendly smile. Then, instead of returning to the house to monitor the cleaners or work on my freelance designs, I drove straight to a strip mall on the opposite side of the city. I went into a big-box electronics store and used cash to purchase a cheap, prepaid burner phone. I knew Chloe had access to our shared family cellular plan. If she or Chase checked the GPS ping on my primary phone and saw me sitting in the downtown legal district, the facade would crumble instantly. I left my primary phone turned on and tucked it inside the glove compartment of my car, parked safely at a generic coffee shop. Armed with the burner phone and a notebook, I hailed a taxi and headed downtown to a towering glass skyscraper. If Chloe had a team of PR executives and corporate attorneys ready to tear me to shreds, I needed a shark of my own. I had spent the entire sleepless night researching the most ruthless, formidable family law attorneys in the state. One name kept appearing in the highest-profile, most vicious divorce settlements on record: Evelyn Hale. She was notoriously expensive, notoriously aggressive, and did not take cases unless she smelled absolute victory. I sat in the sleek, minimalist waiting room of Hale and Associates for 45 minutes before a paralegal ushered me into a corner office. Evelyn Hale sat behind a massive desk of polished slate. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored crimson suit, with sharp, calculating eyes that immediately assessed my worth the second I walked through the door. "Mr. Sterling," she said, not offering her hand. "You requested an emergency consultation. My hourly rate is $800. I assume you understand that, given your attire, you don't look like my typical clientele." "I am aware of your rate, Ms. Hale," I said, taking a seat opposite her. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a cashier's check for $5,000, money I had secretly squirreled away from my freelance graphic design gigs over the past 2 years. I slid it across the slate desk. "I am here because my wife is Chloe Sterling, the lifestyle influencer." Evelyn's sharp eyes flickered with immediate recognition. A slow, deeply intrigued smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Ah, Chloe's Nest. 3 million followers, a dozen lucrative brand deals, and a meticulously curated image of domestic perfection. Suddenly, your presence in my office becomes incredibly interesting. Tell me everything." I didn't waste her time with emotional outbursts. I laid out the facts with clinical precision. I explained her sudden absences, the hiring of Chase, and the accidental CloudSync discovery. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a tablet, and loaded the video from the encrypted hard drive. I slid it across the desk to her. Evelyn Hale watched the footage of my wife in the hotel room. She listened to the audio, the mocking laughter, the cruel dismissal of my role as a father, the boastful admission of infidelity. She didn't flinch. She watched it twice, her expression entirely stoic, before sliding the tablet back to me. "I confronted her last night," I continued, my voice tight. "She didn't apologize. She threatened me. She told me that if I filed for divorce, she would use her wealth to bury me in court. She said she would use her PR team to paint me as an abusive, lazy parasite, and that she would take full custody of my son. She demanded an open marriage, and I pretended to agree." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Your wife is a narcissist, Daniel, but unfortunately for you, she is an incredibly well-funded narcissist. And her threats are not entirely empty." "But I have the video," I protested, pointing at the tablet. "I have proof of her adultery. I have proof that she calls our family a prop." "You do?" Evelyn nodded. "But we live in a no-fault divorce state. The courts do not punish infidelity with custody loss. As for her derogatory comments, a clever PR team and a high-priced lawyer will spin that footage into oblivion. They will claim she was venting under immense pressure, or worse, they will claim you illegally recorded her and attempt to have it stricken from the record entirely." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So she wins. She just gets to treat me like a slave and keep my son." "I didn't say that," Evelyn corrected sharply. "I am telling you the reality of the family court system. Family courts prioritize stability, resources, and the status quo. Right now, her status quo is multi-million-dollar brand deals, a pristine public reputation, and the ability to outspend you 50 to 1. If we walk into a courtroom today, it will be a bloodbath. She will drag the proceedings out for years. She will bleed you dry, and she will likely maintain primary custody because she can afford an army of nannies and elite tutors." "Then how do I beat her?" I asked, a desperate hollow ache expanding in my chest. Evelyn leaned forward, the predatory shark finally showing her teeth. "To beat a giant, Daniel, you do not fight them where they are strongest. You cut them off at the knees. Her power, her leverage, and her entire legal defense rest completely on her brand. Her money comes from sponsors who require a squeaky clean, family-friendly image. Her public support comes from mothers who believe she is a devoted, flawless parent." Evelyn paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "As your attorney, I cannot legally advise you to sabotage your spouse's business," Evelyn stated, her tone shifting into a careful, deliberate cadence. "But hypothetically speaking, if a major public scandal were to occur, if her sponsors were to suddenly invoke the morality clauses in their contracts and drop her, if her income evaporated overnight and her reputation as a mother was irreparably destroyed by her own actions. She would have absolutely no leverage in a courtroom. She would not be able to afford a lengthy legal battle. And a judge would look at a disgraced, bankrupt woman and happily award primary custody to the stable, loving, actual primary caregiver. You. I stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle violently snapping together in my mind. I didn't need to fight her lawyers. I didn't need to fight a PR war. I needed to destroy the very foundation her empire was built upon. And suddenly I realized the ultimate fatal flaw in Chloe's arrogant design. Chloe was the face of the brand. Chase was the manager. But I was the IT guy. I was the one who managed the home servers. I was the one who set up the broadcasting software for her live streams. I was the invisible man holding the keys to the control room. I understand, I said softly, a dark, dangerous clarity washing over me. The meantime, Evelyn continued, writing a list on a legal pad and tearing it off for me, you must continue to play the compliant husband. Do not give her a single reason to suspect you are planning to leave. I want you to meticulously document everything. I want pediatric records showing you are the only parent who takes Leo to the doctor. I want school logs showing you do every drop-off and pick-up. I want a silent paper trail proving that you are the sole pillar of that child's life. I can do that, I nodded. Good, Evelyn smiled, standing up and finally offering her hand. Gather your arsenal, Daniel, and when her empire inevitably burns down, call me. I will be ready to pick through the ashes. I shook her hand, the grip firm and resolute. I left the towering skyscraper and hailed a cab back to my car, my mind racing with absolute, lethal focus. Chloe thought she was the director of this movie. She had absolutely no idea that I was about to hijack the broadcast. For the next 6 weeks, I delivered the greatest acting performance of my entire life. If Chloe thought her carefully curated Instagram grids and tearful vlog apologies were masterpieces of deception, she had absolutely nothing on the facade I built inside our own home. To her, and to her arrogant manager, I had become the ultimate broken doormat. I had completely accepted my role as the captive servant. Her boldness escalated with terrifying speed once she believed I was too afraid to leave. The manufactured fights and flimsy excuses to leave the house stopped entirely. She no longer felt the need to hide her affair. Chase began coming over to the house constantly, not just for production meetings, but for dinners, weekend brunches, and late-night strategy sessions that lasted well past midnight. He would lounge on our expensive linen sofa, his bare feet propped up on the coffee table I had built with my own hands, sipping the craft beer I had bought with my own money. Daniel, grab Chase another IPA, would you? Chloe would call out from the kitchen island, not even looking up from her phone. Sure thing, I would reply, my voice dripping with mild, agreeable compliance. I would fetch the beer, hand it to the man sleeping with my wife, and offer a polite, vacant smile. Internally, a dark, raging inferno threatened to consume me, but I forced the fire down into the freezing, methodical depths of my mind. I was no longer a victim. I was an architect. I was gathering the arsenal that would soon reduce her empire to ash. Evelyn Hale had given me my marching orders. I needed to build a silent, undeniable paper trail proving that I was the sole emotional and physical pillar of my son's life. Family courts, Evelyn had explained, dealt in hard facts, not he said, she said accusations. I needed documents. I started at Leo's school. I made an appointment to sit down with Mrs. Higgins, his kindergarten teacher, under the guise of wanting to check on his social development. After a pleasant conversation about Leo's love for painting, I smoothly transitioned to the real reason for my visit. Mrs. Higgins, I'm trying to organize our family records for a new filing system at home, I lied flawlessly. Would it be possible to get a printout of the authorized pickup and drop-off logs for the year, just for my own peace of mind? Of course, Mr. Sterling, the sweet, older woman smiled, pulling up the file on her computer. As the printer whirred to life, she offered a sympathetic, knowing sigh. You know, Daniel, I have to commend you. You are such an involved father. We see a lot of busy families here, but you are the only one who has signed Leo in and out every single day since September. And you're always the one at the parent-teacher conferences. Chloe's schedule is just incredibly demanding right now, I offered, playing the supportive husband. I understand, Mrs. Higgins replied gently, handing me the thick stack of printed logs. But children remember who shows up. You're doing a wonderful job. I walked out of the school with a 40-page document proving that Chloe hadn't picked up her son from school a single time in over 8 months. Next was the pediatrician. I visited Dr. Aris's clinic, utilizing the same polite, organized demeanor to request copies of Leo's complete medical history and visitation logs. The receptionist handed over the files without a second thought. As I flipped through them in the parking lot, the evidence was stark and damning. Every single signature on the intake forms, every single emergency contact update, every single vaccination consent form for the last 5 years bore only one name: Daniel Sterling. Chloe's signature didn't exist in the medical record. To the healthcare system, she was practically a phantom. I scanned all the documents, encrypted the files, and emailed them directly to Evelyn Hale. The foundation of my custody case was now mathematically bulletproof. But the custody battle was only half of the war. To truly cripple her leverage, I needed to uncover the financial rot festering beneath her multi-million-dollar brand. Because I had been the one to wire our smart home, set up the mesh network, and build the original secure server where Chloe stored her video archives, I still had master administrative access to the network's back end. Chloe, in her arrogant belief that I was nothing more than a glorified babysitter, had never bothered to revoke my IP clearance. She had changed her phone password, but she had completely neglected the central nervous system of her own business. Late one Tuesday night, while Chloe and Chase were supposedly at a trendy downtown restaurant discussing brand synergy, I sat in the dark of my home office. I bypassed the standard user interface and accessed the network's root directory, sifting through the encrypted business ledgers she thought were securely hidden. Chloe's nest was structured as an S-corporation, meaning all of the revenue from her sponsorships, AdSense, and merchandise should have been flowing into our joint corporate accounts that I was legally entitled to as her spouse. But as I cross-referenced the brand deal contracts with the actual bank deposits, a massive, glaring discrepancy emerged. A major cosmetics sponsor had recently paid her $250,000 for a multi-video integration. But according to the joint account ledger, only $50,000 had been deposited. My eyes narrowed in the blue light of the monitor. $200,000 was missing. I dug deeper, my fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the digital breadcrumbs she had carelessly left behind in her tax prep folders. It took me nearly 3 hours, but just past 2 in the morning, I finally found the leak. It was a completely separate, heavily shielded limited liability company registered in the state of Delaware. The name of the LLC was Aesthetic Horizon Holdings. I pulled up the corporate registration documents. The principal managing director listed on the paperwork wasn't Chloe. It was Chase. But Chloe was listed as a silent 90% equity partner. A cold, vicious thrill ran down my spine as the reality of the scheme clicked into place. She wasn't just cheating on me physically. She was actively, methodically embezzling marital funds. She and Chase were deliberately siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars of sponsorship revenue out of the Chloe's Nest accounts and hiding it offshore in a dummy corporation before the money could ever hit our joint ledger. She was slowly draining the empire's cash reserves so that when she finally decided to drop the dead weight and file for divorce, she could claim her net worth was significantly lower, legally shielding her actual fortune from the asset division. It was a massive, undeniable case of financial fraud and spousal fiduciary breach. I downloaded every single ledger, every wire transfer receipt, and the Delaware LLC incorporation documents. I packaged them into a secure zip file and sent them into the waiting, predatory hands of Evelyn. "Got it," Evelyn replied via text mere minutes later, proving the shark never actually slept. "This is marital fraud, Daniel. A judge will absolutely crucify her for hiding assets. We have the sword. We just need her to lower her shield." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, slow breath into the quiet, dark room. The legal trap was fully loaded. The custody evidence was ironclad. The financial fraud was documented. Evelyn was ready to completely dismantle Chloe in the courtroom the moment her public facade collapsed. But I didn't want this to just be a quiet, legal victory. Chloe had looked me in the eye and threatened to use her millions of fans to destroy my reputation, paint me as a monster, and take my son. She had weaponized her audience against me. Therefore, it was only fitting that her audience would be the ones to witness her true face. A week later, the golden opportunity presented itself. Chloe swept into the kitchen, buzzing with manic, caffeinated energy, and slammed a thick marketing binder onto the marble island. "Daniel, I need you to prep the broadcasting software on the home server for next Thursday," she announced, her eyes shining with pure, unadulterated greed. "We are doing a massive million-viewer YouTube livestream. I'm officially launching the Chloe's Nest Family First skincare and merchandise line. It's going to be the biggest revenue drop of my entire career. I need the tech to run flawlessly. I looked at the marketing binder, then looked up at my wife, the woman who had called me a babysitter, the woman who was actively stealing my son's financial future. A live stream, I repeated softly, my voice perfectly level. Next Thursday. Yes, she snapped, impatient. I'll be doing a live Q&A in the studio, and then I need you to cue the promotional video right at the climax of the stream. Chase will be handling the live chat moderation. Can you handle the broadcasting software, or do I need to hire an actual IT guy? I offered her a gentle, reassuring smile, hiding the executioner's blade securely behind my teeth. Don't worry, Chloe, I said smoothly. I'll handle the broadcast. It's going to be a stream your fans will never, ever forget. The morning of the live stream, our house didn't look like a family home. It looked like a high-budget Hollywood production lot. By 8:00 a.m., a swarm of makeup artists, lighting technicians, and brand representatives had descended upon our property. Massive, heavy-duty C-stands holding blinding LED softboxes were erected in the center of the living room, completely blocking the television. Thick, black power cables snaked across the expensive hardwood floors like aggressive electrical vines, taped down with yellow gaffer tape. I navigated the chaos with a calm, detached precision. The first and most vital step of my operation had nothing to do with cameras or software. It had to do with my son. I had arranged for Leo to spend the entire day and overnight at my mother's house across town. I told Chloe it was so the house would be perfectly quiet for the broadcast, a suggestion she enthusiastically praised as surprisingly proactive. In reality, I was evacuating my son from the blast radius. When the nuclear bomb I was building finally detonated, I wanted Leo as far away from the toxic fallout as physically possible. Once I returned from dropping Leo off, I retreated to my home office, the designated control room for the broadcast. Chloe's launch of the Chloe's Nest Family First skincare line was the culmination of over a year of marketing buildup. She had teased it mercilessly on her grid, promising her followers a line of products that embodied pure maternal authenticity. The revenue projections were staggering. According to the ledgers I had secretly forwarded to Evelyn Hale, Chloe and Chase had invested nearly $1 million into the initial inventory, banking on the live stream to drive immediate sold-out pre-orders. Daniel, Chloe's voice pierced through the hum of the production crew. I stepped out of my office and walked down the hall. Chloe was sitting in a tall makeup chair in the center of the living room, a professional stylist aggressively teasing her blonde hair into effortless beachy waves. She was wearing a soft, pastel pink silk blouse, a color specifically chosen by a marketing psychologist to evoke warmth, trust, and vulnerability. Yes, I asked, keeping my hands casually shoved in my pockets. We are live in exactly 3 hours, she instructed, not looking at me but staring critically at her own reflection in the stylist's lighted mirror. Chase says the backend server is showing a slight latency drop. Are we hardwired into the gigabit switch? If this stream lags while I'm holding the serum up to the camera, I swear to God, I will lose my mind. Everything is hardwired, I assured her smoothly. I bypassed the Wi-Fi router entirely. You have a dedicated fiber optic pipeline straight to the broadcasting software. It won't buffer. Chase stepped out from the kitchen, holding a clipboard and his ever-present iced Americano. He was wearing a fitted blazer and a smug, incredibly punchable grin. He walked up behind Chloe, resting his hands casually on her shoulders. A subtle, territorial claim that made my blood run cold, though I didn't let a single muscle in my face flinch. Just make sure you hit the transition cues on time, man, Chase said, looking at me with thinly veiled contempt. When she finishes the Q&A segment, she's going to say the activation phrase, because your family deserves nothing but the unfiltered truth. That's your cue to roll the master promotional video. Do not be late on the button. I've got it, Chase, I said. The unfiltered truth. I'll make sure it plays right on cue. Good, Chase smirked, turning his attention back to his clipboard. I'll be in the adjacent dining room moderating the live chat. We are expecting upwards of 800,000 concurrent viewers. This is a massive aesthetic pivot for the brand. Let's not screw it up. I turned and walked back to the quiet sanctuary of my dark office. I closed the heavy oak door, locking it from the inside with a soft, definitive click. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and stared at the multi-monitor setup glowing in front of me. On the left monitor was the Open Broadcaster Software, OBS, interface, the digital nerve center that would route Chloe's camera feed directly to her massive YouTube audience. On the right monitor was a localized folder containing the media assets for the stream. The holding screens, the lower third graphics, and the official promotional video. A slick 2-minute advertisement featuring Chloe running through a sunlit field with paid child actors. My hands hovered over the mechanical keyboard. My heart was beating a slow, heavy, rhythmic drumbeat against my ribs. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't terrified. I felt an absolute, terrifyingly cold sense of purpose. I opened a hidden, password-protected directory on my desktop. I dragged the encrypted 80-gigabyte video file, the hotel room footage I had salvaged from the cloud sync glitch, and dropped it directly into the OBS media bin. I opened the Scene Transitions panel. I set up Scene A, which routed the live feed from the living room camera. Then I bypassed the official promotional video entirely. I created Scene B, linking it directly to the hotel room footage. I adjusted the audio mixing board, ensuring that the volume on the hotel room video was maxed out, guaranteeing that every single whisper, every mocking laugh, and every sickening insult would blast through the speakers of 1 million smartphones and laptops with crystal-clear fidelity. I mapped Scene B to a single red macro key on my Stream Deck. All I had to do was press that one button, and the feed would instantly cut from the live studio to the darkest, ugliest reality of my wife's betrayal. Once the trap was digitally set, I leaned back in my chair and watched the clock on the wall tick downward. 30 minutes to live. The house fell eerily silent as the production crew cleared out, leaving only Chloe in the living room and Chase at his moderation station. 15 minutes to live. I queued up the holding screen on the YouTube broadcast. It displayed a beautifully designed graphic, Chloe's Nest Family First launch starting soon. I watched the live viewer count on my dashboard begin to skyrocket. Her fans had been waiting for this for months. They were pouring into the digital waiting room by the tens of thousands, 50,000, 150,000, 300,000. The live chat log beside the video player was scrolling so incredibly fast it was just a blur of pink heart emojis, crying face emojis, and frantic excitement. 5 minutes to live. The concurrent viewer count crossed 700,000. I put on my heavy, noise-canceling studio headphones. I unmuted the live studio microphone in the living room. "Mic check," I said into my headset. "Chloe, can you hear me in your earpiece?" "Loud and clear," Chloe's voice replied, crisp and professional. "How are the numbers looking?" "You just crossed 800,000, Chloe," I reported. "You're breaking your own record." "Perfect," she breathed, a tone of absolute ravenous hunger in her voice. "Okay, let's make some money." "Stand by," I commanded, staring at the glowing red macro key on my desk. "Going live in 3, 2, 1, you're live." I clicked the transition button. The holding graphic vanished, replaced by the brilliant, high-definition feed of my wife sitting in our living room. Chloe looked absolutely breathtaking. She was bathed in soft, flattering light, looking directly into the camera lens with a smile so incredibly warm and genuine it almost made me sick. "Hi, my beautiful friends." Chloe beamed, her melodic, perfectly pitched voice radiating through my headphones. "Oh my goodness, I am looking at the viewer count and I am in tears. I am so overwhelmed with gratitude right now. Thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart for being here with me today." She paused, pressing a delicate hand to her chest, playing the humble, overwhelmed mother flawlessly. "You guys know that Chloe's Nest has always been about one thing, authenticity," she continued, leaning slightly forward, creating a false sense of intimacy with the hundreds of thousands of women hanging on her every word. "It's about the messy, beautiful, perfectly imperfect reality of raising a family. When I decided to formulate this skincare line, I didn't want to just sell you a product. I wanted to give you something that represents the purity, the devotion, and the absolute honesty that I strive for every single day in my own home, with my own husband and my own son." In the other room, I watched the live chat explode with adoration. "We love you, Chloe. You're such an inspiration. Best mom ever." My finger rested lightly against the cold plastic of the red macro key. "I have poured my entire soul into this project," Chloe said, letting a single, perfectly timed tear glisten in the corner of her eye. "And I am so incredibly proud to finally share it with the world, because at the end of the day, as mothers, as wives, we all know that our families deserve nothing but the unfiltered truth." She offered a brilliant, dazzling smile to the camera, holding the pose for the transition. In my dark office, a cold, ruthless smirk finally touched my lips. "You asked for it," I whispered into the quiet room. I pressed the red button. The mechanical switch of the red macro key depressed with a satisfying, tactile click. It was such a small, effortless physical movement, Yet the digital shockwave it unleashed was catastrophic. On my left monitor, the open broadcaster software interface instantly executed the command. The transition swept across the screen. The brilliantly lit high-definition feed of my wife, sitting in her pastel-pink silk blouse, a perfectly manufactured tear glistening on her cheek as she spoke about the sanctity of family, vanished into the digital ether. In its place, Scene B went live to 840,000 concurrent viewers. The screen plunged into the dim, grainy, amber-lit shadows of the downtown luxury hotel room. For a fraction of a second, there was a disorienting visual whiplash for the audience. The chat feed, which had been flying by at light speed with heart emojis and pre-order excitement, suddenly hitched. The relentless scrolling slowed to a confused crawl as hundreds of thousands of screens across the globe displayed the dark, messy room instead of a sunny, highly produced skincare commercial. And then, the high-fidelity audio kicked in, bypassing the living room microphones entirely and feeding directly into the broadcast mix. "You sure the husband isn't going to check your location on Find My Friends? He seemed pretty tense when we left." Chase's voice boomed through the live stream, arrogant and unmistakable. On the screen, his shirtless back moved into the frame, his hands tangled aggressively in Chloe's blonde hair. Out in the living room, a profound, suffocating silence dropped over the house like an anvil. Chloe had a massive confidence monitor set up just behind the main camera lens so she could watch the broadcast feed in real time. I watched her through the crack in my blinds. The fake maternal smile was still plastered across her face, frozen in a state of suspended animation. Her eyes darted to the monitor. She expected to see herself frolicking in a sunlit field with child actors. Instead, she saw herself backed against a hotel room wall, fiercely kissing the man who was currently sitting in our dining room. The blood drained from her face so rapidly she looked as though she had been physically struck. Her jaw dropped. Her hands, resting elegantly in her lap, began to tremble with a sudden, violent tremor. "Daniel, God, please!" The hotel room version of Chloe scoffed through the speakers, her dark, venomous giggle cutting through the air. "He's completely clueless. He thinks I'm out here exhausting myself for the brand. As long as I let him play house and pat him on the head occasionally, he's totally fine. He's practically a glorified babysitter at this point." "Daniel," Chloe shrieked, the sound tearing from her throat in a ragged, panicked pitch. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated terror. "Turn it off, cut the feed right now." I didn't move a single muscle. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap, and watched the right monitor. The YouTube live chat was no longer stalled. It had erupted into an absolute apocalyptic frenzy. The text was flying by so fast the server was struggling to render the comments. "Wait, what is this? Is that Chase? OMG, she is cheating on Daniel. Glorified babysitter, she's a monster. WTF is happening. Someone screen record this right now." In the dining room, Chase finally realized that the audio echoing through the house wasn't the uplifting acoustic guitar track of the promotional video. I heard his chair scrape violently against the hardwood floor. He sprinted into the living room, his clipboard clattering to the ground. He looked at the confidence monitor, his face turning an ashen, sickly gray. "What about the launch next week?" The recorded version of Chase asked on the stream. "Oh, please," Chloe's voice mocked, dripping with arrogant disdain. "These women are so gullible they'll buy whatever overpriced garbage I slap my name on. We just play the family first card and they eat it up. It's basically printing money. I just have to keep up the perfect family routine until the fourth quarter sponsorships clear." If the cheating had merely wounded her brand, that specific string of sentences was the fatal gunshot to the head. She hadn't just humiliated her husband. She had openly, viciously insulted the very people who funded her lavish lifestyle. She had called her devoted, adoring fans gullible, and referred to her new, highly anticipated skincare line as overpriced garbage. "Daniel," Chloe screamed, her voice cracking as she scrambled out of the makeup chair, tangling her foot in the microphone cable and crashing hard onto her knees. She didn't even bother to stand up. She scrambled on all fours toward the hallway, her pastel-pink blouse slipping off her shoulder. Chase was right behind her. They hit the heavy oak door of my office like a pair of terrified animals fleeing a forest fire. The brass doorknob rattled violently as they tried to twist it, but the deadbolt held firm. "Open the door," Chase bellowed, pounding his fists against the thick wood. "Daniel, you psycho, shut the stream down. You are violating NDA contracts. Open the damn door." "Please, Daniel, please." Chloe sobbed hysterically, her fists beating a frantic, rhythmic tattoo against the door panels. "I'll do whatever you want. I'll give you whatever you want. Just turn it off. I looked at the live viewer count. It hadn't dropped. The drama was so magnetic, so utterly unprecedented in the pristine world of lifestyle influencers, that the algorithm was actually pushing it to the trending page. The concurrent viewership spiked to 950,000. Nearly 1 million people were currently watching the pristine, untouchable queen of mommy bloggers completely self-destruct in real time. The hotel video played out to its agonizing end, culminating with them falling back onto the hotel bed. I let the screen hold on black for 5 agonizing seconds, letting the silence ring out over the broadcast. Then I reached forward and clicked the End Stream button. The red live indicator in the corner of the OBS software blinked off. The connection severed. The digital transmission was permanently terminated, but the damage was irreversible. In the age of the internet, a broadcast to 1 million people is never truly gone. Hundreds of thousands of fans, drama channels, and commentary accounts had already screen-recorded every single devastating second of the feed. It was already spreading across Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit like a highly contagious virus. I reached forward and pulled the master power cord from the back of the desktop, ensuring they couldn't attempt a panicked, desperate reboot to try and issue an immediate apology. I stood up from my chair, my heart rate incredibly steady. I felt lighter than I had in 7 years. I walked over to the heavy oak door and unlatched the deadbolt. I pulled it open. Chloe practically fell into the office, her makeup smeared with heavy black streaks of mascara, her hair a wild, chaotic mess. Chase stood behind her, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and profound panic. "What did you do?" Chloe gasped, staring up at me from her knees, her voice a hollow, broken wheeze. You ruined me. You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything, Chloe," I said smoothly, looking down at her with absolute icy detachment. "I just did exactly what you asked. I gave your audience the unfiltered truth." Chase lunged forward, grabbing the collar of my shirt. "You're a dead man, do you hear me? I'm going to sue you for everything you are worth. You illegally broadcast private footage." I didn't flinch. I calmly reached up, gripped his wrists, and forcefully ripped his hands off my shirt. "I wouldn't be throwing legal threats around if I were you, Chase," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, lethal register. "Especially not after the digital paper trail I just handed over to my attorney. Or did you think I wouldn't find out about Aesthetic Horizon Holdings? How does the state of Delaware feel about marital fraud and corporate embezzlement?" Chase froze. The arrogant, aggressive posture completely evaporated, replaced by the stark, wide-eyed terror of a man realizing he was about to face a massive federal indictment. He took a slow, stumbling step backward, looking at me as if I had just grown a second head. "You," Chase stammered, looking from me to Chloe, entirely realizing that the golden goose was dead and the slaughterhouse was already waiting for him. Without another word, he turned on his heel and sprinted down the hallway. Seconds later, the front door slammed shut. Chloe remained on the floor of the office, entirely paralyzed. Her phone, sitting on the desk, began to vibrate. Then it began to chime. And then it erupted into an absolute, relentless cacophony of notifications as sponsors, PR managers, and thousands of outraged fans began demanding answers for the apocalypse that had just been broadcast to the world. The filter was gone. The empire was burning. And as I stepped over her and walked quietly out of the house, I knew the war was already won. I stepped out of the front door of my sprawling, perfectly manicured suburban home and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. The lock clicked, a sharp and definitive sound that felt like the closing of a heavy vault door on the darkest chapter of my life. The cool evening air hit my face, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't feel the suffocating weight of my wife's manufactured reality pressing down on my chest. I walked down the paved driveway, got into my modest sedan, and put the car in drive. I didn't peel out. I didn't speed. I drove away with the serene, unshakable calm of a man who had just successfully defused a bomb by handing it back to the person who built it. I headed straight to my mother's house to pick up Leo. When I arrived, my son was sitting on the living room rug, building a massive, chaotic tower out of colorful plastic blocks. When he saw me, his face lit up with a brilliant, toothy smile, and he ran across the room to crash into my legs. I scooped him up, burying my face in his soft hair, inhaling the scent of his strawberry shampoo. He was safe. He was happy. And thanks to the digital apocalypse I had just initiated, he would never be used as a prop in a ringlit vanity project ever again. I didn't turn on my primary phone that night. I didn't want to see the frantic, raging text messages from Chloe or the barrage of missed calls from her panicked PR team. Instead, I put Leo to bed in my old childhood room, sat at my mother's kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, and opened my laptop. The internet is a volatile, unpredictable beast, but there is one universal truth about online culture. It absolutely loves a spectacular downfall, especially when the person falling has spent years preaching from a pedestal of moral superiority. The collapse of Chloe's nest was not a slow leak. It was a catastrophic, real-time implosion. When I opened Twitter, I didn't even have to search for her name. 3 of the top 5 trending hashtags in the United States were dedicated to the livestream. Chloe canceled, gullible idiots, and justice for Daniel. I clicked on the hashtag and watched the digital firestorm rage. Hundreds of thousands of users were dissecting the agonizing, 2-minute clip I had broadcasted. While the infidelity was certainly a massive point of shock, it wasn't the catalyst for the absolute rage boiling over in the comment sections. The internet has seen cheating scandals before. What the internet does not forgive, however, is a creator biting the very hand that feeds them. Chloe's fatal mistake wasn't just sleeping with Chase. Her fatal mistake was getting caught on crystal-clear audio calling her devoted fans gullible, mocking them for buying her overpriced garbage, and openly admitting that her entire family-first ethos was nothing more than a cynical, manufactured cash grab. She had shattered the parasocial relationship. She had insulted the mothers who had supported her, bought her merchandise, and defended her in comment sections for years. The live subscriber counter for her YouTube channel, which someone had set up on a Twitch stream, was plummeting at a terrifying, unprecedented rate. She was losing tens of thousands of subscribers every hour. The mass exodus was staggering. But the social media backlash was only the surface level of the destruction. The true, fatal blow to her empire was happening in the corporate boardrooms of her sponsors. Influencer contracts are notoriously strict when it comes to public image. They are laced with morality clauses that allow a brand to instantly sever ties if a creator engages in behavior that brings the brand into public disrepute. By 9:00 a.m. the following morning, the corporate exodus had begun. The organic baby food company that had sponsored her for 3 years released a swift, sterile statement on their official pages, announcing they had terminated their partnership with Chloe's Nest, effective immediately, as her recent comments do not align with our core values. A major athletic wear company followed suit less than an hour later, then a meal kit delivery service, then a luxury stroller brand. It was a domino effect of corporate distancing. Nobody wanted their products associated with a woman trending globally for scamming her audience and emotionally abusing her husband. In less than 24 hours, Chloe lost nearly $3 million in projected annual sponsorships. But the most devastating financial hit came from within her own house. The Chloe's Nest Family First skincare line, the launch I had sabotaged, was a massive, capital-intensive venture. According to the ledgers I had reviewed, Chloe and Chase had fronted nearly $1 million to manufacture the initial inventory, using a high-interest business loan secured against the projected sales of the livestream. The warehouse was currently sitting on thousands of boxes of expensive serums and creams. With her audience actively boycotting her and her name suddenly toxic, the pre-orders were non-existent. In fact, the few fans who had previously bought her merchandise were actively issuing mass chargebacks through their credit card companies. The skincare launch was dead on arrival. Chloe wasn't just losing future income, she was suddenly, violently millions of dollars in debt for an inventory she could never ever sell. At 10:00 a.m., my burner phone buzzed against the wooden kitchen table. It was a text from Evelyn Hale. "The PR team is trying to issue a statement. Look at her Instagram. Then come to my office. It's time to drop the guillotine." I opened Instagram. Chloe had posted a classic desperate influencer apology. It was a black square with white text created in the Notes app. It was a masterpiece of deflection. She claimed her privacy had been illegally violated by a deeply troubled individual, that her comments were taken completely out of context during a moment of severe mental health struggles, and that she was stepping away from the internet to focus on healing her family. She had turned off the comments, but she couldn't turn off the internet. Video essayists and commentary channels tore the apology to shreds within minutes, pointing out that calling your fans gullible idiots who buy garbage isn't something that can be taken out of context. I closed the laptop, kissed my mother goodbye, and drove downtown to Evelyn Hale's towering office building. When I walked into Evelyn's corner office, the formidable attorney was practically glowing with ruthless satisfaction. She had a thick stack of legal documents resting on her slate desk, perfectly aligned and ready for signature. "I have been practicing family law for 30 years, Daniel," Evelyn said, gesturing for me to sit down. "And I have never seen a public figure immolate their own leverage with such spectacular efficiency. Her lawyers called me an hour ago. They are in an absolute panic." "What did they say?" I asked, settling into the leather chair. "They wanted to offer a quiet, immediate settlement," Evelyn scoffed, a dark smile playing on her lips. "They wanted you to sign a non-disclosure agreement, issue a public statement claiming the video was a deepfake or a misunderstanding, and walk away with a modest cash payout. They are desperately trying to stop the bleeding." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them they have absolutely nothing to bargain with," Evelyn replied smoothly. She tapped the stack of papers on her desk. "I informed her counsel that we are officially filing for divorce on the grounds of cruel and inhuman treatment and adultery. I also informed them that we are filing for sole physical and legal custody of Lee. And just for good measure, I attached the Delaware LLC incorporation documents and the ledger discrepancies proving she and Chase were actively committing marital fraud by hiding assets." I felt a surge of adrenaline. How did they react to the LLC? "Total silence," Evelyn grinned. Her divorce attorney clearly had no idea she was embezzling from the marital estate. It completely paralyzed them. Because she hid assets, the court will likely penalize her heavily during the division of property. Furthermore, I have filed an emergency injunction freezing all of her business and personal accounts until the forensic accountants can sweep the ledgers. She cannot access a single dime of that hidden money to pay off her skincare debt or hire a PR crisis firm. "So she's cornered," I breathed, the reality of the victory finally settling over me. "She isn't just cornered, Daniel," Evelyn said, sliding a pen across the desk toward me. "She is bankrupt, disgraced, and legally defenseless. Without her brand, she has no money. Without her money, she cannot drag this out in court. And with the entire world watching her admit to using her child as a prop, no family court judge in this state will ever grant her primary custody over the father who has a flawless, documented history of sole caregiving." I picked up the pen. I looked at the divorce petition, staring at the printed name of the woman who had demanded I live in a cage to protect her lies. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name with a sharp, sweeping flourish, legally severing myself from the wreckage of Chloe's nest. The empire was officially reduced to ashes, and I was finally walking away with the only treasure that ever truly mattered. The wheels of the family court system, which Evelyn Hale had warned me would be agonizingly slow and brutal against a millionaire, turned with remarkable, almost blinding speed against a bankrupt pariah. With her assets frozen by the emergency injunction and the Delaware LLC exposed to the federal authorities, Chloe's high-priced, shark-like legal team abandoned ship the absolute second their retainers bounced. She was forced to hire a deeply overwhelmed, mid-tier attorney to help her navigate the catastrophic, smoldering wreckage of our divorce. When we finally stood before the judge 3 months later, Chloe was a ghost of the woman who had cornered me in our kitchen. She wore a plain, off-the-rack beige suit. The beachy, effortless blonde waves were pulled back into a tight, severe knot. She stared blankly at the polished mahogany table of the courtroom, unable to even look me in the eye. Evelyn Hale didn't just win the case. She orchestrated an absolute legal massacre. Because Chloe had committed egregious marital fraud by hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars offshore, the judge heavily penalized her during the asset division. I was awarded the house, the remaining liquid funds from our joint accounts, and a substantial portion of the recovered Delaware money to cover my legal fees and secure Leo's future education. But the money was entirely secondary. The true victory came when the judge reviewed the transcript of the live stream. He had listened to Chloe explicitly state that she used our son and our marriage merely to print money. I was granted full physical and legal custody of Leo. Chloe was granted supervised visitation every other weekend, the exact, terrifying sentence she had so arrogantly threatened to impose upon me. Chase, predictably, vanished into thin air. The absolute moment the internet turned on them and the corporate sponsorship money dried up, the loyal manager packed his bags, completely scrubbed his digital footprint, and fled the state, leaving Chloe to face the millions of dollars in skincare inventory debt entirely alone. I heard through mutual acquaintances that, to stave off total, irreversible bankruptcy, she was forced to take a mid-level social media management job at a regional dental supply company. There were no more ring lights. There were no more sponsored trips to Chalum. There was only the quiet, agonizing reality of a life she had actively, callously destroyed. As for me, I didn't retreat back into the shadows. I took the settlement money, sold the massive, sterile suburban mansion, and bought a beautiful, cozy 3-bedroom house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I launched my own boutique graphic design agency, and without the suffocating, 24/7 weight of managing Chloe's fake empire, my business flourished. On a warm Sunday morning, exactly a year after the live stream, I was standing in my new kitchen flipping pancakes. Leo ran into the room, wearing a mismatched superhero cape, giggling hysterically as our newly adopted golden retriever chased him around the island. I watched my son, his face glowing with genuine, unfiltered joy. I didn't reach for a camera, I didn't check the ambient lighting, I didn't think about the aesthetic composition of the room. I just picked him up, kissed his cheek, and sat down at the table to eat breakfast with him. My life wasn't a broadcast anymore. It wasn't a brand, a demographic, or a monetization strategy. It was real, and for the first time in a very long time, it was more than enough. A valuable lesson for the listener. If there is one absolute, echoing truth to take away from Daniel's story, it is this: never let someone's perceived power force you into a corner. The bigger the illusion people build to hide their true nature, the harder they fall when the truth is finally brought to light. Narcissists and manipulators thrive on making their victims feel small. Chloe used her immense wealth, her millions of followers, and her carefully crafted public persona to convince Daniel that he was powerless. She weaponized his love for his son, threatening to destroy his life if he didn't submit to her cruel, humiliating demands. When we are faced with abusers who seem to hold all the cards, our immediate instinct is often to surrender just to survive. But power built on a foundation of lies is incredibly, dangerously fragile. Daniel survived not by screaming, arguing, or throwing a tantrum, but by recognizing the massive, structural flaw in his wife's empire. He realized his own worth. He meticulously gathered his evidence, secured the right allies, and let her arrogance be the very thing that destroyed her. You do not have to accept a life of quiet desperation just because someone else holds the microphone. Your worth is not defined by your paycheck, your follower count, or the way a toxic partner treats you behind closed doors. If you are being manipulated, gaslit, or forced to live in the shadows of someone else's ego, remember Daniel's quiet, lethal resolve. Gather your strength, document the truth, and refuse to participate in the illusion. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Have you ever had to deal with a partner or family member who cared more about their public image than the people who actually loved them? How did you break free from their illusion? Let me know your thoughts and your stories in the comments below. If you found Daniel's journey as thrilling and empowering as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another incredible story. Until next time, know your worth, protect your peace, and take care of yourselves.